This is the I-6 portion of our webinar series addressing the annual goal. Please make sure that when you're writing an annual goal, you're taking into consideration the full length of the IEP year and the progress the student is capable of making within that time. We want to make sure that our goals are written to close the achievement gap and that they're rigorous and relevant to our students' learning. The annual goal must include 4 components. The first component you're going to want to include is the who. Please make sure that when you're documenting your student's name within that annual goal that you're using their given name and not a nickname, as this is a legal document. The next part, the component that you're going to want to document within that goal is what do you want that student to be able to achieve? Make sure that you're documenting it in terms of visible actions that one could observe. What will we want to see that child performing? The next component is condition. So in what environment, in what context do we want this student to perform this behavior? In this section of the goal, you're going to also want to make sure that you include things like special equipment that the student might need to demonstrate the skill. For example, if the student requires a calculator to engage in the decomposition of numbers, you're going to want to make sure you document that within the goal. Or if they require the use of a visual schedule to navigate their day, you're going to want to document that. In addition, you're going to want to document special supports that are required for the student to achieve the behavior you're hoping to see. So if they require prompting or really any other kind of transactional support that is required in order to ensure the student will be successful at the end of their IEP year in demonstrating the specific behavior we're looking to observe. The fourth component of an IEP is the degree to which you expect to see the student do this. This is where our goal really becomes very measurable in terms of how often we expect to see the student engaging in this behavior successfully. So for example, if you had in the baseline data that the student is currently demonstrating a specific behavior 3 out of 5 times and you'd like to see that behavior increase, you might write your annual goal to state that the student will demonstrate that very same behavior 5 out of 5 observed trials. Make sure that your baseline data directly aligns in measurement with your annual goal. When writing a goal, we want to make sure that it is measurable. So things that you might take into consideration is what do you exactly have to see that student doing to know that they're successful in terms of demonstrating that behavior? Be specific. If several different people were to observe this child's performance, the student's performance, would they see the same thing? Would they know what they're looking at well enough to come to the same conclusion when assessing whether or not the student is achieving that specific behavior? And can the performance be measured as it is written, or is there additional information required? If there is additional information required, please articulate that within the IEP. We don't want to say things like the student will become an emergent reader. You can say that, but what does that mean? So specify the student will become an emergent reader by demonstrating the following behaviors, and then make sure that it's all measurable and stuff. Okay, so procedures for measuring the student's progress toward achieving that annual goal. It's important that we develop a well-constructed and robust progress monitoring system when measuring our students' achievement toward their annual goals. So within this section, you're going to want to identify what measurement tools are you going to use to monitor your students' progress. Please make sure that the tools you are using directly align with the behavior you are looking to observe. So for example, please refrain from stating that you're going to use I-6, Infinite Campus, to measure a student's reading behavior. There's nothing in Infinite Campus that's going to allow you to monitor their progress or measure their behavior. If there is something in there that allows you to do that, please specify exactly what it is you're looking at. Just not just Infinite Campus as a tool. So perhaps you're using information that is a part of an assessment, a district-wide assessment. Perhaps book level. Book level is an Infinite Campus. But so you wouldn't say I'm using Infinite Campus. You would say I am using book level to measure my students' progress toward achieving their annual goal. If it's a reading goal, you might also have a running record. You might, in addition to that, you might be using MAPS data and looking specifically at strands. You might be using a student's reading response journal to identify the level of comprehension, things of that nature. So you're going to have a robust progress monitoring system, and you're going to want to talk about how often you're going to analyze those measurements that you've specified. So how frequently are you going to use that measurement tool to monitor student progress toward achieving that annual goal? And also, we want to make sure we're identifying who is the person responsible for utilizing that measurement tool, for making that observation, for giving that running record. You might have a multitude of people engaging in this very robust progress monitoring system. You might have your instructional assistant collecting data on student behavior and strategy use on the playground. You might have the general education teacher evaluating writing samples and providing running records to your student. It may be you who is doing the running records. Maybe both you and regular education teacher are doing that. So just specify who's responsible for each of those pieces. The next section discusses how to write the short-term objectives or benchmarks when you have a student participating in alternative assessments. Please note that all goals for the student taking an alternative assessment must have short-term objectives or benchmarks. So this goes for SDPE goals, PT goals, OT goals, speech and language goals. If that student is taking an alternative assessment, you are responsible for writing all of their goals with either short-term objectives or benchmarks. So what is the difference between a short-term objective and a benchmark? Short-term objectives break the skills down into the annual goal into discrete, measurable, or intermediate steps. And what does that mean? So this is like a growth goal in terms of learning trajectories or learning landscapes. So if the student perhaps is going to start with one skill set or one strategy, and they're going to get really good at that and strengthen their muscles with that, and then you're gonna build on top of that. The student's growth will go then to the next step. So once they've really gotten solid with this, now we're going to add this next learning piece to it. These short-term objectives have to stand alone, and just like your annual goal, you want to make sure that the baseline data provided in the present level of performance directly aligns with the measurement or the degree to which you expect to see this behavior in the short-term objective. Benchmarks are like about breaking the the annual goal down into specific segments. So for example, the student might be expected to achieve or demonstrate this behavior 3 out of 10 times by December, but then by February you want to see that student doing it 5 out of 10 observed trials consistently, and then perhaps in June you're hoping to see that student doing it 6 out of 10 observed trials. So that's kind of how the benchmark goes. And again, making sure that your wording for that benchmark is consistent with the annual goal. So if the annual goal is to achieve something 10 out of 10 observed trials, which it might be, you're going to want to make sure that it's going to be 3 out of 10 observed trials, and then maybe 5 out of 10 observed trials. So making sure that your wording and your measurement are just very, very consistent with that. Okay, and try to be rigorous in setting out those benchmarks for kids. We really want to stretch our students and support their success. Never underestimating them, right? So, the final section of the I-6 asks you to articulate how frequently are you going to communicate your students' progress toward meeting that annual goal with parents and guardians. The law says that we need to do that as often as our regular education peers. Now, having said that, please don't write that there. Please be more specific about it. Please write something like, I will communicate, that you will communicate quarterly, your students' progress quarterly with parents or guardians. Or if you're at the elementary level, it would be every trimester you're going to communicate to parents. The tool that we use for communicating with parents is the progress note. And I know that some people were not aware that they needed to complete that. We use the progress notes as a very clear document that specifies all the stuff that we need to be communicating with parents about. It is also a very nice way to have evidence of the fact that we have communicated with parents. I know many people said, well, I call parents very, very often, and this is really nice and clearly documented, and it's best practice because the document asks you to really speak specifically to how your student is progressing toward meeting that annual goal. So it is a requirement. It needs to be done either quarterly or every trimester, depending on what level you're at. Elementary, it's every trimester. Secondary, it is quarterly. Having said that, it's important to note that if you have an IEP within 30 days of the time that you would be sending a progress note out, you may waive the construction of that progress note because you've had it within 30 days. But it's really important for you to note that the IEP must have been held 30 days, within 30 days of the time that progress note would be going out. Okay, let's see here. We're almost done. And then I think that's it. Okay, thanks and have a great day, guys.